Hello, everybody, and this is Stacy from The Advisor. And today I'm very excited because we have a very special guest. We have Shannon Freeman, and she is an amazing individual with a lot of hats. And today, especially, we're going to talk about burnout, something that we all deal with at one point of our life, sometimes a lot. And sometimes we get stuck in it, and sometimes we have symptoms and we just don't even realize that we're falling into it. But anyone that goes through burnout knows that it could change your entire life, it can change your health. It could really destroy you if you don't catch it in time and you don't learn how to cope with it. So today, Shannon's here. We're going to talk about burnout and we're going to talk about a lot of different ways to help yourself, improve yourself, and move on to different levels in life where you could elevate and be happy with the person you are. So, Shannon, tell us about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Stacy. I am a holistic practitioner and energetic coach, and I specialize working with women who are suffering from corporate burnout. And we work with holistic practices to ensure their success and just create a more powerful presence.
I feel it's so important, especially in the world that we live in, in corporate world, especially. There's so much pressure that's put on you. And I remember when I was in the corporate world, it was constant pressure. From the moment I got on the bus to the moment I got into the city, it was just, and then knowing what was ahead, I was always like, I felt that inner stress, and it was very hard to deal with. And then you have responsibilities and you have expectations put on you. And also being a woman, sometimes you feel like there's a need to prove yourself. And, it's a lot that goes on. And sometimes you don't even realize, but all the energy, all the time, everything you're putting in, you're forgetting about yourself. You're forgetting about,
Exactly.
self-love, self-care, and all you're focusing on is the things you got to get done for everybody else but you. And then slowly burnout starts to creep up on us. And sometimes we don't even realize it. Now, do you find a lot of times women, have burnout and they don't even realize that they're having the symptoms, and all of a sudden they just crash and things
Yeah,
like that.
definitely. I think, too, being in the corporate world, we really nail our success on these kind of material markers. And so we are buying the purses, we're buying the clothes, we're going to the spa days, and it's almost like we're filling up this cup that just is full of holes because these are not things that define us. It's not things that actually genuinely um, fill us at a soul level. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes you're so inundated with like trying to um, look at these material markers that you forget to just kind of water the grass that's underneath you. You think that it's greener on the other side always.
Yeah.
And then usually, I mean, before you know it, and at least in my experience, you're completely exhausted, you can't get out of bed. You might check out for a couple of days and kind of like re-up yourself. And so you go through these cycles of like burnout and brilliance, and you're really killing it at your career, you're kicking butt, and then it turns around and it kicks your butt right back. And then you don't even notice that it's a cycle. A lot of us just think that that sign of burnout is a form of success. Like, look at me. For me, it was like, oh no, I'm exhausted, I can't get out of bed. It's because I've been working 15 and 16-hour days for the last 2 weeks and juggling being a single mom.
Yeah.
And for me, I wore it almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah, I think that's for most women too. And I know when I was in the corporate world, I had my, my visions of, getting my Louis Vuitton bags, again, getting my martinis on a Friday night and getting a
Right.
nice pair of shoes. And, it was all about materialistic things. And then, life just took a total turn on me. And, it took me in a totally different direction. But, the corporate world is a real backstabbing, industry. And there's a lot of pressure. And it's not about the materialistic things, but it's very easy to get caught up into it because everyone around you in your environment is doing it. And so it becomes the norm, I think.
Yeah. And for me too, because I always worked in the construction industry. So it's really a male dominated industry. And women don't operate the same way that men do.
Yeah.
And so almost it's kind of like this need to like fight for approval, and you want to, outshine every other man that's in that office.
Yeah.
And then too, I think when you add kids to that as a woman, I don't want to be judged that I have to stay at home because my child's sick, especially as a single mother.
Yeah.
So it's, for me to ask for help almost seemed like I was stepping backwards.
Right.
And we're meant to ask for help. We're meant to, live together. We used to live in like tribal systems and now we're all kind of
Yeah.
independent. But for me, it was like, I need to do everything on my own. I don't need any help. I'm an independent woman.
Yeah.
And that's like literally just adding gas to this tiny little spark that like quickly, I think just turns into an inferno.
I kind of felt the same way. Like I hated asking for help. I felt
Yeah.
like an independent woman and it killed me. Anytime I had to ask for help, I was mortified because it was like I wanted to do everything myself and to have to ask someone else, it did feel like a step down. And I'm sure a lot of women out there have that feeling where, that they feel like they're moving backwards instead of forward when they ask for help. But in reality, I think we all need help and that's how we grow. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think, really it wasn't until I met my husband, and so I had back surgery for a fracture that had occurred in high school. And it really wasn't until I was forced into a position where I had to ask for help. Like I couldn't walk. I
Yeah.
had like a walker, I had a cane. It was a bedazzled cane. But I couldn't move. I couldn't take my
Yeah.
kids to practice. And he stepped up. And to be honest, I don't know if without that surgery, if I would have ever like humbled myself. And, even in
Yeah.
this loving relationship, this partnership, I still really struggled. But I think too, as women, and especially in a career, we are taught like we need to manage it all. Like the women have it all. You make a choice to work and you're killing it and you're thriving in your career. But you made the choice to have a baby. So that kind of comes second, right? And like we should
Mhm.
put our career first because that's where our priorities lie. That's how we, pay the bills. And so it I think the cycle of that is something that no one really talks about because we
Yeah.
just assume that we should do it all. We don't need to ask for help. You're not being, capable of time management and you're not managing your career. You obviously can't do both if you
Right.
ask for help. And it's not about that. But then now I ask for help. I love being able to include other people. I love that my
Yeah.
kids can see that, like, no, you can depend on other people. And I think too, also, having the upbringing that I did, just being taught at a very early age that I had to depend on myself. I can't ask anybody for help because
Yeah.
it'll fall through. And I think that's also something that probably a lot of women deal with, that's unspoken as well.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. I think a lot of women feel like they have the need to do it all, and they try to be a wife and they try to be, this career person, and if they have kids, they're trying to be a mother. And you really, just like a career or even a business, you can't focus and do all these things all by yourself. It's virtually impossible. Either
Yeah.
you end up burning yourself out or you end up slacking in certain areas.
Yeah.
And who's going to suffer? Is your husband going to suffer? Is your partner going to suffer? Are your children going to suffer? Is your job going to suffer? But somebody, you can't do it all. It's virtually impossible, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Now, do you feel like what are some of the things that you suggest when for women so they avoid burnout when they have a corporate job or when they're working or even as a mother, that person who wears a lot of hats? What are some of the things that people should look out for and maybe some things that people should do so they don't fall into that cycle of burnout?
Yeah, I think for me, I noticed a significant change when it was, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was slamming the 5 hour because I needed to cook the 5 course meal for my kids and I needed to still get to the gym. And I still had emails that I had to answer. But also really leaning into that rest, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
now I carve out sacred time and, regardless of what, not every person's into skincare. I wasn't really into it either, but like just to take the time to take off my makeup and to like put, face creams or serum. I mean, the older I get, there's a little bit more serums, but it's, just taking that time. But two, noticing when you do need help, like calling in, a house cleaner, seeing when the laundry gets piled up. For me, it was like my office and my emails were answered and my projects were, being delivered on time. But then I would come home and my house was like a complete disaster. My kids are little, so they couldn't, they can't handle the lion's share of the cleaning. But then it was like, all right, well, I guess I better pull an all-nighter so I can make sure my house is spick and span,
Yeah.
and meal prep for the week. But I'm burning very quickly, like the candle on both ends. And
Yeah.
there's times too, that I was driving from work to get my kids from daycare, and I literally like fell asleep at the wheel and like woke up like in the median and was like, I'm exhausted, but then also let me stop and get some more Red Bull because that
Yeah.
will clearly solve everything. But even for me with burnout, I think to distract myself, there was a lot of shopping. There was the material markers of success. At the time, it was, over exercising. So I would get that kind of adrenaline rush
Yeah.
and that high, and it would
Hmm.
bypass whatever I was feeling.
Yes.
There was looking around and seeing, like, okay, as a single mom, I have the car, I have the house, I have my kids in the daycare that they need to be in, they're wearing the clothes that they need to be. And I was still unfulfilled. And that
Yeah.
was, I think, the biggest like marker of like things aren't right, because I'm
Yeah.
doing all the things that I'm supposed to, and I have all the things that I'm supposed to, but I still feel like so unfulfilled, and I feel like I'm still not measuring up to what society thinks that I should measure up
Yeah.
to. um but I think too, realizing that burnout stems because we're not fulfilled with ourselves and
Yeah.
finding that connection with ourselves.
Right.
But also, in order to do that, like, we do kind of have to take a step back. And I think for a lot of women too, in burnout situations, we have a huge lack of boundaries. And, because we do have kids, like, oh, well, you left early to go to your kids' soccer game or whatever. Do you think you can finish this on the weekend? And,
Right.
of course, yeah, I'll have it on your desk, like, before you even wake up on Saturday. And that was just like my need to drive. But also, that's a huge lack of boundaries. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
mother first, I'm not a coworker. And I think some people take that for granted. I think too,
Yeah.
especially with us always being connected with our phones, we're expected to answer those emails. We're expected to pick up the phone at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And that's our sacred time. It's our sacred space. We're not at the office.
Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, like, where are you feeling this lack, this emptiness, and like,
Yeah.
where do you need to create boundaries to create that sacred space to connect back with yourself?
Yeah.
And as woo as it sounds, I think it's so crucial, and I think it's something that all women really do need to nurture, right?
Yeah.
Regardless if you're in the corporate world or a mother, just as a woman, we need to nurture that sacred space.
Yeah.
um, but I think we forget that along the way because we're so busy with all of the things.
Yeah. I also found that, by talking to a lot of different moms that go to work and they have other things and other responsibilities to attend to, they feel actually guilty. They feel guilty taking time out for themselves and doing things that they need to for themselves.
Yeah,
And, that self-love, that self-care, trying to recharge yourself and create those borders, they feel guilty. Like, they put themselves last on the list. And
yeah,
anytime they do something for themselves, there's a large amount of guilt they feel, and they totally forget themselves. And I think that's when you start to see the burnout, and you can
yeah,
just tell. Like, I can just see sometimes, I'll see somebody, I could tell they're going through burnout just by their appearance, their
yeah,
skin color, maybe, the way their hair is or the way they're dressing, or that, they put weight on, and sometimes you see people when they go through stress, they start to gray a lot quicker.
yeah,
It all shows physically. And so it affects your mental health and it affects your physical health. And they say 70% of illnesses are caused by stress, and that's scary. And so
yeah,
you think about burnout, how burnout is such a huge issue in the United States and all over in many parts of the world as well. How this is affecting people, mentally, physically, spiritually, at work, in their private lives, and it's something that has to be, it has to be taken care of. And what are some suggestions that you feel are good suggestions for people who, first they need to get over that guilt and not, and what are some things that people need to realize, when they're suffering from burnout?
yeah. I think as a mother, there was a huge amount of time where you could not tell where my kids start and stopped and I started and stopped.
Mhm.
And I think they're, especially being a single mom for really most of their lives, there came a point of like, if I need to go to the gym and release whatever stress is happening in a healthy way, not in like the over working out way.
Yeah.
And just, they were in daycare all day. Like I felt so much guilt of like taking them to the daycare at the gym, but also like I do not have the mental bandwidth to do all of the things. And I do notice like my stress for me, hiking on the mountain when they're little, they couldn't necessarily hike with me, but like just getting outside, doing something, even if it was like 15 minutes, I
Yeah.
need that time for me. And even sometimes I will say, because not everyone has the time or even the money to go to the gym, right? But like
Yeah.
that drive from like the office to daycare or the office to home, and like I don't have to listen to music. If I want to listen to music, that's great. If I want to listen to a podcast, if I want to
Yeah.
listen to binaural beats, just taking that time and maybe like not speeding home,
Right.
as awful as it sounds. And I think, we struggle as women because we do feel that guilt. Like, well, we have free time because I do it all the time. If I'm at home and I'm like, oh, well, do I want to, veg and watch trash TV and not do anything? Or
Yeah.
should I do the laundry? Or should I clean out the pantry like I've been wanting to? Like, I feel like any amount of idle time should
Yeah.
be time that's maximized, right? And
Right.
I think that's where, no, I want to lay on the TV and I want to watch 90 Day Fiance and I just
Yeah.
want to be still because I've been moving, moving, moving. Our nervous systems are not meant to be in that state all of the time.
Yeah.
But I think to tell someone, don't feel guilty for going to the gym, that doesn't happen overnight. That's like
Yeah.
a definite mindset that you have
Yeah.
to realize your kids will not remember if they were at daycare or if they were at the gym daycare. Your kids do
Yeah.
not remember. I think even with cooking, coming from an Italian family, like there
Mhm.
was a dinner that was cooked every single night on our table. My kids don't know if that came from a bag. They don't know if I heated up a pizza. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think they care. Like now they're a little picky and they'll ask for like dishes, but like let's save that for something special. I don't have to
Yeah.
go out every single night and have this, immaculate, but also you look at, the Instagrams and there's these moms, but it's fake. That's a fake reality. They are not
Yeah.
looking that fabulous and making
Yeah.
those meals every single day. Um, and to give yourself grace. It's weird because a couple weeks ago we went on this trip and I kept saying like give yourself grace, give yourself grace. Like the kids would talk about a problem or how
Yeah.
they were stressed out, and then it just like clicked and I'm like, God, Shannon, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace for the things that you're doing, for the
Yeah.
business that you run, for the career that you have, for the children that you manage, because it's a lot. And
Yeah.
two, you add all of like the healing stuff that kind of comes along with it.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace. It's okay. It's okay. I think for all of those things,
Yeah.
and we just need to be better at doing that instead of being so critical. And I think as women, we definitely are very critical because that's how we're raised.
Yeah.
We judge the other girl's dress or the other girl's purse, and we're always very competitive, and then we
Yeah.
ultimately are competitive with ourselves.
Right. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, like social media plays such a fake imitation role. And people actually take a lot of these things to heart and they think it's serious. So like, you have that cook and that mom who's making these fabulous, dinners and her hair is perfect and her makeup is on perfect and everything looks great. But it's not realistically, it's not like that. You have a mom who, either if she's a stay-at-home mom or even if she's at work, either or they're doing things all day long, they're worn out, they don't look like like this perfect idol chef in the kitchen,
Yeah.
or you see somebody and they look fabulous, and their body structure looks fabulous, everything looks perfect, her hair is in place, and they take these pictures and people think they look like that all the time, but then you'll see them the next day and they don't look anything
You
like
wouldn't
the
recognize
pictures.
them.
You wouldn't recognize them. There's
You would have
many
no idea
times.
who they are.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times. And you see that too with celebrities. Like they'll take pictures of celebrities when they're not in front of the camera and they're just walking on the street, going to the store or something like that. You won't even recognize that person.
Yeah.
And even being in the media field, they worked on these people for 3, 4 hours in the makeup room before they actually got in front of the camera. So of course they're going to look great.
Yeah.
If I had somebody every day working 3, 4 hours on me, I would look phenomenal.
Yeah. Right. That's what I always tell my husband when we're trying to go out. I'm like, listen, this is like a multi-person task and I'm doing it on my own and I'm
Yeah.
making magic happen. So just give me some space to
Uh-huh.
finish doing what I need to do. Takes a whole
Exactly.
team of people to make someone look this good.
Yes, exactly. And the sad thing is that the younger generation takes this to heart and they think, and then you'll see people on social media and they write these beautiful, perfect stories about how wonderful their life is. And then other people get depressed, because their life might not be going as well. But the more perfect it sounds, the more untrue it is. And it's
Yeah.
like because nobody's life is perfect. We all have our ups and downs. We all go through, the good and the bad. Nobody has like a perfect lifestyle. It's just, there is no such word. Like I
Yeah.
say the word perfect sometimes when I'm talking, but honestly, it shouldn't even be in the vocabulary because there's no such thing as perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody has ups and downs, whether it's with your spouse, your partner, relationships in your family. Everybody has something. We all have stories to tell. So life is not perfect. So to believe these things is just, it's pretty much like reading a fiction book. If you want to
Yeah.
look fantasy, go on to Facebook. It's just,
Yeah.
these are things that you can't take to heart. It's all about how you feel and what you feel you need. And I'm sure, when you were going through burnout, how did you know and how did you feel like, okay, I'm not headed in a good direction. I feel this way and I need to do something about it. Like, because how did
Yeah.
you feel that inside you? What were some of the things that were going on that you knew you were headed in the wrong direction?
For me, it was the lack of energy, I think, and just the lack of, I would, I would like to say, without being Facebook fake, for the most part, I'm definitely like happy. I find joy. I think there's a lesson and not a loss in almost everything. And it was just this, it was waking up and just being exhausted. Like I could sleep for 18 hours and
Yeah,
still not be able to get out of bed.
right.
It was looking at stuff like the piles of laundry. And in my head, I'm like, well, I'll just order some more clothes. So I don't even have to deal with that. Like that was honestly like the logical thinking.
Yeah, yeah,
But being with my kids, which is like one of the most joyous things that I could ever have in this timeline.
yeah,
Um, it was like I just felt like I was going through the motions, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And it really did feel like Groundhog Day. It didn't feel like there was any movement on this timeline. It was just like I was stuck and it was a rinse and repeat. And this
yeah,
rinse and repeat was just in dirty water. And it was just this inner knowing of like, this is not sustainable. Like, I do
yes,
not want to live my life like this. And,
yeah,
um, I did the first time that I suffered with it a lot. I went to the doctor for some cyst and they gave me, and I told them, he asked about my stress level and I'm like, well, I'm a single mom. I'm holding the entire financial load for my 2 kids. I just got divorced and things are great, it's dandy. And
yeah,
so he had prescribed me with an antidepressant and with Xanax, and he told me to take the Xanax with the glass of wine, and within 2 weeks I was in the hospital. Like I could not take a sip of water without violently throwing it up. And
yeah,
the doctor at the hospital, because I was like, it has to be this medicine, it's the only new thing, he was shocked and he was like, have you ever taken antidepressants before? And I was like, no. And he's like, this is for someone who's had years of experience with it, and that's twice your size. And I was like, what the heck is
yeah,
this? Like, what's going on? But it was just that, like, I'm desperate and I'm looking for anything to help.
yeah,
Because it's not sustainable. And I think I love working. I think part of the spiritual path, a lot of people, they go off on these exotic locations and retreats to find themselves. As a working single mom, I can't leave for like 2 months to go figure out who
yeah,
I was.
yeah,
And so it was really just out of like, there has to be something better than this. Like, I can't
Yeah.
imagine this being the rest of my life. I have too many beautiful things around me and too many beautiful people around me to feel this low and to not feel, like my heart is going to explode every single day.
Yeah.
And that was really, I think, the exhaustion, staring at the computer screen and then being like, what the hell was I doing for the last 30
Yeah.
minutes? Or, flipping through the TV stations, like nothing was satisfying me. It was just this complete loss of zest for life.
Yeah.
um, and it shouldn't have been like that. From the outside looking in, I'm sure it didn't look like that at all, because that was very much, if everything looks good, then
Yeah.
everything should be good. It'll just fall into place, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think, so many people don't realize that you don't have to go to an exotic, retreat, or you don't have to go and spend a fortune on a vacation, at a spiritual place. You could do things in your own home. There's
Yeah.
many times I've done so many practices in my own home and made some time. And a lot of times if you don't have a lot of time in between and you're busy, just take 15 minutes out of the day, or, maybe do something in the morning and maybe something right before you go to bed, or whatever your schedule's like, just like stick it in little bits and pieces and you'll see a difference. Like, is there things that you do or suggest to the listeners that they could do at home to help them renew themselves so they can start moving forward and they don't get stuck into that burnout or they don't progress in burnout?
Yeah, and I think the simplest thing, because we've probably all fallen victim to like, oh,
Yeah.
buy this crystal, it'll help. Buy this incense, it'll help. And they do, right? They have their own amazing powers. But for me, because I was not about the woo for the longest time, I didn't get it. I didn't want to
Yeah.
smell like patchouli. I didn't understand what they were saying. But like now looking back and like seeing what brings us kind of back to that sacred place was just stopping and connecting with my breath and like
Yeah.
feeling this breath travel from like the top of my spine back through my skull all the way down,
Hmm.
right, and like to my whole body. And then as I kind of grew in my spiritual practice, I would connect with, this light that was above, and then bring it all the way down, and then I would anchor it into like this crystalline network. But
Yeah.
to start, just to take a minute when I could feel myself getting overwhelmed because there's, 100 emails that just came in the last hour. There's, something that was delayed with, a vendor at work or whatever it was. Just taking a minute and just kind of closing my eyes and focusing on that breath, picturing that breath just going through my body and
Yeah.
bringing that energy down. Because you don't need to believe in woo to know that if you breathe and you
Yeah.
focus on it, it does calm your nervous system down.
Yes.
Um, and that was, I think, too, now working with my daughter, and when I can see her getting anxious and excited, and the same with my son, like, look at me, let's just focus on these breaths. You don't need any magic for that.
Yeah.
It's your mindset. But I think the first part of that is knowing when you feel yourself getting that anxiety, and like
Yeah.
for me, like the little alert on my Apple Watch would like blow up and like your heart rate's jacked. And I'm like, cool,
Yeah.
like what do you do? But I think it's the mindset of knowing that it's okay. Again, giving yourself grace, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm overwhelmed. I have in-laws coming into town. I have, dinner that I'm supposed to cook for Easter. I need to get to the mall to get a prom dress for my daughter. And I still have to, be at this meeting. It's giving yourself grace. Like, yeah, I feel overwhelmed. I'm a little bit stressed. And I think too, as you get more comfortable with that and being able to communicate it to those around you,
Mhm.
that in itself is magic. Like being able to tell the
Yeah.
kids, like, hey, today was a day. Just give me like 10 minutes to be quiet in my bedroom. I'll deal with whatever you have. Give me 10 minutes. But like,
Yeah.
you know, setting those boundaries, I think, and then people respect it, and then they, engage with you differently because they do
Yeah.
know that you're doing hard things, or, something's going on.
Right. I think that's so important, and I love the fact that you brought up breathing because it's so important. I even remember, like, my aunt used to get panic attacks, and when I was with her when she would get them, I would just slow her breathing down. I would just calm her down just by slowing her breathing down, and she would get out of the attack just by just slowing her breathing down, concentrating on her breathing, just clearing her mind, and it would go away. And people don't realize, but breathing is so powerful. And you could do it anywhere. Like, you could even be in the car and you
Yeah.
could, you could just, there are techniques. They have one where you could just close one nose, breathe in, and just slow your breathing down. And then you could close the other nostril and you can just
Yeah.
do the same thing. Little simple things like that people don't realize can make a huge impact, and even being at home, like you said, and just taking a little time to do different breathing exercises, because there's so many different types, you know,
Yeah.
could really change a person and calm them instead of like going to get Xanax, try different breathing exercises and, try different methods that are actually natural, that actually have, the same effect.
Well, and it sustains your success, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't always, pretty soon, you're like, popping the Xanax probably more than what you're supposed to because you're
Yeah.
still anxious. And two, over the course of going through trying to get my back better and then ultimately getting surgery, like when you're stressed and you're anxious, all of the pain receptors just open right up
Yeah.
and it floods your body. So it's like every little ache and pain is like tenfold, right? And like,
Yes.
when I was going through this a couple years ago, like I swear I was dying every day. I mean, my back was an issue, yes, but it was every single ache and pain I just noticed like times 100. And it was because
Yeah.
I was so anxious. But then, two, working with the hospital that I was working with, they're all about like mindfulness and how do you bring mindfulness in as like pain control,
Yeah.
essentially. And that I honestly, that did that had more benefit for me than any of like the epidurals or any of like the pain medication. I mean, at the point that I was in, like the pain pills did nothing other than make me sleep, which was lovely because I would pass out long enough to get some relief, right?
Yeah.
But like the breathing and bringing it down, and I think too, whatever your source is, if it's God, an angel, spirit guide, whatever, just connecting to that and bringing that down and that kind of like universal love and light,
Yeah.
as cheesy as it sounds. But I think like as you bring in the breathing practices and then start introducing these other elements and seeing how you respond to that. And again, it's mindset. If you think that something higher above you is coming in and it's going to fill your body with love, it
Yeah.
will, like regardless of your spiritual or religious beliefs, it
Yeah.
it does work. It happens. It's beautiful too.
Yeah, oh, I agree with you 100%. And people, when I talk to people and they're skeptic about it, I say, well, the whole world is run by energy. If there was no
Yep.
energy, there would be no world. So let's think about that for a second,
Yeah.
how powerful and how prevalent energy is in our world. It's everywhere. It makes the world, live. It makes the world work. It's everywhere in your home. If you were next to a negative person, do you ever feel like that your energy is getting kind of sucked down a little? That negative person is actually sucking your positive energy. That's how powerful energy is from person to person, from place to place, from tree to tree. It's just all over the place. And if you think
Yeah.
about it in that sense, if we're able to open ourselves to other energies and positive energies, if we're able to connect with whoever our higher source is, you know, a lot of great things could happen.
Yeah.
If you're a positive person and you're thinking positive and you're asking for positive energies, you know, those positive energies will come, and for people who are, skeptical about that, I know a lot of people that could be that are skeptical about that, but that yet they believe in the law of attraction. I'm like, well, if you believe in the law of attraction,
Yeah.
think about it for a second. Positive energy brings positive people. What does the law of attraction say? You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you could
And
just,
that's, I think too, when you reframe it, when you give someone a perspective that's just slightly to the side of what they're used to looking down, right?
yeah,
And then you can frame it like and connect these things to like science, right? And like,
yeah,
not the new age, but like, knowledge that people a millennia before us knew and
yeah,
understood intricately. I think it helps them just shift the frame slightly and then they see
yeah,
it differently and it makes sense. It's like turning the puzzle piece enough so it finally fits in.
yeah,
And I think that's probably, I don't want to say half the battle, but I think working with people and introducing stuff like breath or bringing in,
yeah,
your higher self, when you just change it, we can interchange spirit guides and angels all day long. Like no
Right.
one's arguing that there is something up there watching
Yeah.
out for us, giving us messages. We can fight about the details on what you want to call it later. Let's just, get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
But I love when people see that, like, it's like that aha moment of like, oh,
Mhm.
that makes sense. I get that. Like the energy, energy created this universe. It would not be here without energy. The effects of sound bowls on our body, because our body is primarily water. And you look at how
Right.
it affects water, anywhere else, how does it not affect us? And I
Exactly.
love just seeing the connection into just the technology now where people can provide that data.
Yeah.
Where it kind of like, it's not all woo. There's a lot of science
Yeah.
intertwined. It's not new age. It's been here forever. Um, and hopefully like we keep moving forward like that. I think we need it for sure.
Yeah, and people, if they really do their history, like holistic living and breathing and different plants and usage of a lot of different things, started thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So this is nothing new. This is all stuff that has been here for a long time, So it's just learning and investigating. Like you said, if you look back, most of this stuff pretty much is all science-backed based information. So
Yeah.
it's not something that you just pulled out of a hat, science can back it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for just the new wave of healers and coaches and all of the people, like when you kind of intertwine the spirituality with the science, the effects of that I think are more profound than like any prescription that we could ever. And most prescriptions are based off of something that is in
Yep.
nature, right? It's the
Yep.
chemistry. It's just people can make more money probably selling it through big pharma than us going and forging.
Yeah.
But it's just I think it's important to remember, like, I guess our roots, right? Like where we came
Yeah.
from and how this all started. And I grew
Exactly.
up like hardcore in the church, so
Mhm.
I think the science aspect was like really what kind of like turned me and brought me to the other side, because
Yeah.
it's not witchcraft, it's not crazy, stuff. It's
Right.
real and it works.
I think of the part of the problem is the lack of education. I
Yeah.
think if people knew more knowledge and they really dive deeper into it, they would understand more because a lot of times it's people reject things because they fear it because they don't understand it, and that's a big problem I think, in
Yeah.
this.
No, agreed. And two, I mean, like being raised in the church, it was a huge no-no. Like that is
Yeah,
witchcraft. Like, no, there are not spirits. No, you cannot talk to anything that's outside of a priest. Like it was just, and our church was specifically very strict, like
yeah,
hugely, there is black and white and there is no gray area. So it was almost like risky for me to even kind of be curious about that whole other side.
yeah,
Um, and I was very adamant in my faith and going to church, but there was something else calling me.
yeah,
And I think too, I think being raised in Arizona and being surrounded by like these ancient cultures, and like, the mountain that was in our backyard, like had all these petroglyphs, and there's like definitely these carvings of like things that look like aliens, and then the
yeah,
people and the goats, and then there's like, these 10-foot men or whatever.
yeah,
So it's always kind of like this thought of like, well, what did they see? Because I don't think they
yeah,
made it up, you know what I mean?
right,
So it's always kind of this
exactly,
curiosity, like the seeds were planted at a very young age.
yeah. I think, I felt the same way growing up, it was the same thing. And I personally, I am a very spiritual person, and I've seen, it's helped me tremendously, open my eyes up to a broader sense of life and a different way of thinking. I think
Yeah.
it's important sometimes to get out of that gray box, or just, or even dab into outside just a little bit. Don't be afraid, and if you don't like it, jump back in the green box, in the gray box. But try it,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And see, and I think that is it's very helpful. It's very common. It's very, spirituality has kind of released a lot of that black cloud from me, and it's
Yeah.
made me really look at life differently and feel differently, feel a lot lighter, if that makes sense to you,
Yeah.
and I was able to really focus on life and with a different pair of eyes, and people say, "Oh, you're always smiling," because inside I feel happy, and it's like you sometimes walk by people and you could see that they're not happy, and that's not a
Yeah.
way to live life. So it's like, sometimes you have to not worry about what everybody else around you is doing or what you've been taught, but you need to do what you feel is going to make you happy. And I think that too, people have to figure out who they are, without all these labelisms as a professional, without being that mom label, without being, the wife or husband label or the partner label. Take all that away. What do you have? And I've said that to people and they just stared at me with a blank face, because after all those labels were taken away, they didn't know really who they were, because
Yeah.
they spent their whole life in this circuit. And now if you take all those things away, they don't really know who they are as a person.
I love that you said that. I just got chills everywhere. There was someone that I studied under who just had like immense wisdom. I mean, years and years beyond where they should have been. And at the time, I didn't really understand, but the point essentially was like, well, if your kids were taken away, like let's just say that there's a car accident and you no longer had your kids, you no longer had your job, like who are you really? Because you're not, I mean, yes, you are a mother, but like you're not, that's not what makes you you. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, like why are you talking about my kids getting in a car accident? But
Yeah.
also like very true. And I need to be, the point of the lesson was I need to be so happy with myself that even if, God forbid, I did lose my kids, that I would still go on shining my light and I would still go on spreading love despite them no longer being with me in this timeline. Right. And
Yes.
so it's hard to explain to some people because they're very programmed, right? Like,
Yes.
no, you are your car, you are your house, you are your job, you are, your spousal status, whatever. But if you take all of those things away, would you still genuinely, truly be happy?
Yeah.
And that's where you really have to go in. And I think too, even going in and looking at the parts of yourself that like weren't so pretty and the times that like it really was in a dark place and like loving that and loving like all of these scars.
Yeah.
Which I say a lot, and my kids and I, before we ever met my husband, we're perfectly imperfect. Like all of these imperfections is what makes us beautiful. And like,
Yeah.
now looking at some of like the really bad relationships and childhood trauma, like I'm at a place now where I can say thank you because I know
Yeah.
how strong I am and I know what I'm capable of doing. And now I'm like finding my stride because I don't have any of that BS to deal with.
Yeah.
I know how to get through like the burnout portions of, managing being a mom and a wife and all of the things. And like, it's like go time, right?
Yeah.
Um, so thank you for showing me exactly how tough, because I know you thought that you were going to take me down and I wasn't going to be able to pick myself back up, but
Yep.
surprise.
Yeah. And I think people have to realize that we are stronger than we give ourselves credit, because I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest problem is that people, after you've been knocked down so many times, your self-esteem and your self-worth gets knocked down with it. And then you have to kind of rebuild it. And the problem is that people don't know how to rebuild it, or they don't think they're worthy enough to,
Yeah.
be that person they dreamt of being, or once was, or and it all has to, you have to kind of just work on yourself, and if you believe in yourself and you work on your self-esteem, you can get through it. You can get through
Yeah.
anything. Doesn't matter how many times you've got knocked down. If you work on your strength, I always say faith, courage, wisdom, strength, and hope, and all those things put together will get you through life, and just being positive and just having positivity in your life, and loving yourself, loving who you are, and figuring out who you are, and who is that person. And once you've figured out all those things, I think no matter how big the problem, you could get through it. Because if you think about it in life, every problem that happened to you, don't you feel like you overcame it? When you're in it, it felt like a horrible crisis. But
Oh
then,
my God. Yes. Like it was literally, there was days where I'm like, I can't survive another day. Like I cannot do this anymore. Like, and then the next day would come and I would feel probably the same way. And then the next day, and then pretty soon I'm like a couple weeks out and I'm like starting to get my footing again. And I survived. And it's,
yeah,
you survive all of your worst days. Sometimes you don't feel like you can or like
yeah,
you should, but I think that's too, that's so much inner strength, and I don't think that enough people give themselves credit for
yeah,
getting through those moments where, because it would take a lot of people down. I know some
Yeah.
of the things that I've been through, I know 110%, a lot of people could not survive that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am amazed in myself. And I think more women, more men, more children should be amazed in themselves and what they do. Like just the
Yeah.
small day to day things, like be amazed at what you are capable of doing. And then when the
Yeah.
really big stuff happens, be even more amazed, be astonished, like
Exactly.
all of the things, like be your best, you know, fan club.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And if you are your best fan club, you'll get through it. You don't need someone to root for you. Root for yourself.
Yeah.
And learn how to do that. And if you believe in yourself, you could get through it. You have to just believe in yourself, and it will get you through anything, I think. Now,
Yeah.
if you had
I
to
agree.
if you had to emphasize everything we talked about today, what are some of the prime things you'd like to really, make the audience realize?
Um, You know, as soon as you said that, it was like I knew where you were going with it. And for some reason, giving yourself grace just keeps kind of bouncing back and forth in my head.
Yeah,
You know, give yourself credit for still getting out of bed and getting dressed. Give yourself credit and grace for getting your kids to school, for getting into the office that sometimes we like absolutely dread going to. You know what I mean? Even
yeah,
giving yourself grace that like you're in a position where you have a job despite what it is and the capacity that
exactly.
it takes to be there. You made that. And I think we are looking for like these huge markers of success, you know, like,
Yeah,
oh, we need to like be a billionaire or whatever. Like every single day is such a huge accomplishment. And I think that we don't give ourselves enough grace to just see the power and the beauty and the strength within that. um, I think we're just hard on ourselves and we
yeah,
shouldn't be because we do amazing things.
right. Exactly, exactly. Now tell everybody some of the different services that you provide.
Yeah. So I do distance Reiki and sound baths. If you're local to the Nashville area, we host workshops and half day retreats here. I've been blessed to integrate with some amazing women that are holistic practitioners. And so, kind of that co creating space has been just really, I think, beautiful because it's a different dynamic. I think it's new to the city. And I also do one on one work for women that are suffering from burnout. And really, in that container, we just go through each of our power sources and our chakra system, but kind
Mhm.
of just embody like what is the woman that you want to embody and how do we strip away all of this armor that's kind of taken a beating over the
Yeah,
course of our lives and rebuild it with something beautiful and luminous and something that just empowers you and has your, you know, most powerful presence at the foundation of it.
right.
And really it's just all about kind of that holistic success instead of looking for these outside um, you know, again, markers of success.
Right, right. Now, how can people get in touch with you?
They can go to my website. It's modernhippiesoul.com. And hippie is spelled Hippie. My kids came up with that name, and so we're sticking with it.
I love it. I love it. And is there anything that you give away on your site, or do you have any specials on your site?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, there is a workbook that you can download that focuses on the sacral chakra and how to kind of harness that power. For women, especially, that's really kind of that's where we literally create. And so that's a huge power source for us. And so you can download that for free by signing up on my website.
Awesome. This has been amazing. Oh my gosh, Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has
Thank you
been
for having
amazing.
me.
I love
I
it.
I love talking to you. I could talk to you for like hours.
I know, I feel the same way. Everything you do is great. And I think it's so important what you're doing. I think all the information you gave today was wonderful because there's more than just popping a pill. There are so many
Yeah.
ways to heal ourselves naturally. And there are so many ways to connect with ourselves and to be able to love ourselves and also learn that if we love ourselves, we should really focus on understanding our body and how it works, because I think the more connected we are spiritually, the more we understand our bodies, and then we can pick up when something's a little off and save
Yeah.
ourselves from falling into that burnout. Because, you know, it took me a long time, but I realized, you know what? If I don't get it done today, I'll get it done tomorrow. And I can't, I say with ease right now, but it took a long time for me to get to that point because I was always the person to start something. And once I started, I was like determined to finish. It was like, and I overworked myself so many times and burnt myself out so many times. And you can't excel in life and you can't be the person you want to be if you're constantly doing too much and burning yourself out. You can't
Yep.
be the great mom, you can't be the great professional, you can't be the great partner. You can't live up to your expectations if you consistently overdo and overdo. And I think one of the biggest things that we talked about today too, I think is don't feel embarrassed to ask for help and don't feel shameful to give yourself some time for you.
Yeah.
And I think those are great, pieces of advice that you shared today on the show too. And I think people have to just live life and enjoy because who knows where we'll be tomorrow.
Yep.
So let's not everything that we work so hard for, we can't take with us. So, you know what? I think it's all about living life and enjoying each day and just making the most out of it because we never know where the next day might bring. So it's just
Agreed.
about being happy and enjoying life. And I thank you so much for being on the show, Shannon. Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And you have a great day.
You do the same.